All right, as we've been saying, another awful day on Wall Street. The market's just closing. Let's take a look. 19,903. The market's down over 1,300 points. Steph Ruhle, NBC News senior business correspondent, joins us now. Steph, we broke through that 20K mark, but we didn't fall below or wipe out all of the gains since President Trump took office, though we were getting pretty close there.
Sure. I think this isn't about the president. It's not even about the immediates in the market. The biggest investors out there are saying we have to address this health crisis. The more messaging we're seeing, we have to absolutely put society, our country, on hold. The rescue package today was meant to address that, whether we're talking about helping small businesses or individuals or big companies. I want to talk about the big companies for a moment, because the last time we saw, and the government doesn't like to call it that, but corporate bailouts were 2008 of the auto industry and the banking industry. And if you remember what happened, that's when Occupy Wall Street was born. Right. That is when you saw this push against capitalism for democratic socialism, because when the bailouts happened for banks, you didn't see workers protected. We continued to see layoffs. We saw CEOs and executives continue to be paid a ton of money, be rewarded with stock that obviously went up. Now, when the government comes in for a bailout, they're basically putting a safety net under the company, protecting the downside risk. But you know who's under that downside risk? Workers who are laid off. They don't get protected. And the airline industry, which is going to get bailed out here over the last few years, has taken 96% of what's known as their free cash flow, what could be their cushion, and bought back stock. That helps executives and it helps shareholders. Right. So right now, if we see a bailout again of the airline industry and other industries that are hurt, there's going to be a lot of public outrage and pushing to make sure the government puts some strings, some caveats to make sure all workers are protected, to make sure that they don't take the money and then still lay people off or remove their health care protections. This time the bailout has to be far more inclusive. And if it is, this is actually a chance to start to remake capitalism to be a bit more inclusive. It's an opportunity.
Steph, there's been a lot of talk that unemployment could hit 20%. I'd like to play what Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin said on CNBC today and get your take on the backside.
I didn't in any way say I think we're going to have that. And let me be clear. If we follow the president's plan, we will not have it.
So just for a little background for our viewers, there was talk that this came up in a Republican luncheon yesterday. Steve Mnuchin clarifying that with CNBC's Jim Cramer today, but saying if we follow the president's plan, we will not have that. So what is in that potentially $1 trillion plan to make sure we don't see 20% unemployment?
Well, let's be careful here. And I don't want to get into any sort of political debate, but 2 days ago, Steve Mnuchin said he doesn't see a recession in sight. A week ago, the president's economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, said buy the dip. So we can say what he's saying and put it over here. But we can talk about what is actually in this plan. And the plan does involve paying, sending people an actual check in the mail, which does help cushion the immediate blow. It's about expanding small business loans. But when you talk to investors, the biggest investors out there, they're saying all of this is just putting Band-Aids on a bigger problem. Until you truly tackle this. Bill Ackman today, hedge fund manager, said until you actually have the whole world go on shutdown for about 30 days, and the closer we get to a vaccine, all of this is child's play. We have to truly tackle the health crisis, and the other things come next.
You mentioned Bill Ackman. I'd like to bring up something else he said. He's urging the president to close the borders, give Americans a 1-month tax holiday, spring break, if you will. He thinks that will make the market soar. What do you make of that?
Now, he has since corrected that a little bit and said he's not, because he also said we're going to hell. Yeah. We're not
he had a lot to say today, as he does. But he's not the only one
who has said that, because think of this. It's piecemeal right now. In certain cities and certain industries, we're saying shut it down, go home, and that's just leaving us completely broken. What Bill Ackman and others are saying, let's universally shut it down for a month, create sort of a national economic holiday where the government steps in and says, we've got your bills covered for now, stay home, get better, don't spread this. And once that's tackled and the sun comes out again, then we're going to be back to business.
Let's talk about the Fed for a second before I let you go, if you don't mind. We know the rates are slashed to near zero. We know they have talked about different kinds of buybacks. Former Fed chairs Janet Yellen, Ben Bernanke, kind of laid out their own ideas. They want the Fed to buy corporate bonds back. How would that add to what the Fed's already doing?
I mean, One thing you could say when you look at those two, you could say, well, why didn't you raise rates sooner? Janet Yellen kept rates artificially low for a very long time while the markets were slowly getting higher and higher. And now we've had a very small cushion, not far that we even as a protection. So we're worried that there could be a credit crunch. We know that there was a credit crisis that those two faced back in 2008. So that could potentially improve things. They're just trying to suggest to the Fed every possible lever they could pull, because now that the rates are down as low as they are, there's really not much more they can do.
Steph, I know you and I share a sentiment that we are all going to get through this together. I know on your show you like to talk about good news rules, positive things for folks. I think it really helps in times like this. Is there any sort of positive we can end things on today? Something we could say to folks about the economy getting better, maybe the market's getting better, some little
Sure.
ray of sunshine?
Sure. Look at what's actually happening in the government right now. 4 weeks ago, during the impeachment, for the last 3 years, you didn't even have Republicans and Democrats looking at one another. And over the last 2 weeks, they have worked together to try to create a solution for the American people. In times of crisis, in our darkest moments, they can be our finest hours. This is a time when you are seeing small and big businesses alike that do have a helping hand. They're reducing fees. They're waiving fees. You're seeing landlords say, don't pay this month. So if you can care about a neighbor, a friend, a stranger, this is the time to do it. And for everybody, I know this is gargantuan, but we got to just take some deep breaths. If we're in this together, we can get through it together.
Yeah, Steph, it is just, look, I know you're a little bit of a distance. You're feet away because we're trying to be safe here, trying to keep social distance, but sending good energy your way. And thank you so much for all of your expertise. And we're going to keep you for another second because we are just waiting for President Trump to start talking. You bring up a great point, though, that the politicians are working together, and that is something we haven't seen recently. And for those folks who are going home and thinking, my gosh, my retirement, my money, my income, we have been through tough times like this, and we saw how bad the markets were in the Great Recession, and they did come back stronger.
And what's different here, this is different from the financial crisis. This isn't some bad actor, some bad behavior. This is like a natural disaster. And the government and the president has said it over and over. He now says he considers himself like a wartime president. But no individual business. It wasn't like you ran a small business irresponsibly. And while the government might not be reaching out to you yet and you're feeling forgotten, they know that none of us caused this, and they want to solve for it. The people we want to think the most about right now are healthcare workers.
Absolutely.
Our doctors and nurses who are truly putting their lives on the line trying to help people, and we want to try to be as considerate of them as we possibly can.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.